Welcome to Resolutions, the official podcast of the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution. Every episode is a journey into the heart of conflict resolution, guided by our diverse community of experts. We're here to explore innovative strategies, share wisdom from the field, and inspire excellence in resolving disputes. Whether you're a dispute resolution professional, a curious learner, or someone passionate about fostering understanding and peace, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's conversation and discover how we can transform conflict into opportunity together.
I'm your host, Aaron Gotthelf. This week I'm sitting with social media strategist Stephanie Marone to discuss using LinkedIn to help your ADR practice catch fire. Stephanie is an outsourced chief marketing officer and social media strategist. She advises law firms, professional service firms, legal service providers, B2B companies, professional associations, and individuals on a full range of marketing and business development services designed to enhance revenue, retain current clients, attract new clients, and achieve greater brand recognition and market share. A lifelong New Yorker, she holds a Master of Science in Strategic Communications from Columbia University and a bachelor's degree in History and Art History from NYU. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
All right, before we start, I should mention this program is part of the ABA Dispute Resolution Section's Practice Development Series. And at this point, I usually make a shameless plug for joining the section. If you're serious about developing a career as a neutral, you should join the ABA Dispute Resolution Section. Stephanie, I know you did a program for us. Was it in person or webinar, or was part of the development series, if you want to talk about that?
It was a webinar, and it was great, and it was about the similar topic, and we really delved into it, and I was so impressed with the audience, the folks who were so engaged, the attendees, and asked all the right questions, and they've been still in touch with me afterward. And so I hope that the listeners of this podcast will do that as well, because, you can learn a lot from today, but I think there's also a lot of benefit to connect with me on LinkedIn, of course, right? You knew I was going to say that. And I have a blog, the socialmediabutterflyblog.com, where I post lots of free tips like this and things that can help anybody in the ADR field, any lawyer, any business professional.
Okay. Yeah. And LinkedIn's a real hot topic right now. So we're going to have folks from all different levels of probably LinkedIn use, from not using LinkedIn at all to being experts in LinkedIn, listening to this podcast episode. So for my folks that are kind of on the learning about LinkedIn on the basics end, let's start with the basics. What is LinkedIn?
Okay, so at the very basic, LinkedIn is the number one largest, most important professional networking site. Many years ago, it was considered a place where you would look for jobs, and it has evolved into so much more. So today, there are 1 billion plus people globally on LinkedIn. And in addition to being a great place to find jobs and opportunities, it has now become a place where people can build their brands and build their businesses. And it's also, I would say, for many people, almost like another website or another bio. It's really important because users have changed in terms of the way that they look for people online. And LinkedIn, especially since LinkedIn has been acquired by Microsoft, is increasingly more important. So it will show up as your either number one or number two Google search result. And that is irrespective of whether you use LinkedIn every day, once a week, once a month, once a year, or never. So it really underscores the importance of using LinkedIn and having a strong LinkedIn profile and presence. It can also, the thing I love the most about LinkedIn is that for many of its features, it's free and people don't take advantage of those things. It's a thought leadership platform. It's a place where you can promote your articles that you've written and speaking engagements, and it's a place where you can meet people who can help open doors for you in so many different ways.
So a lot of folks just talk about social media in general under one giant umbrella? And how would LinkedIn differ from, let's say, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which is now called X, and some of these other social media sites?
Okay, so for your audience, especially, LinkedIn is the most important place where they should be and the platform they should focus on. All the platforms aren't the same. And I don't believe that business professionals and lawyers in particular need to be on all of those platforms. I don't think that they're going to help with business development and brand building. I also think very strongly that you want to do one or two platforms really well and leave it at that, because when you try to do them all, you are going to stretch yourself very thin, and you are also going to realize how much it takes to upkeep them and how one size doesn't fit all. So the message that you post on LinkedIn would be very different than what you post on Instagram, than what you post on TikTok or X or any of those platforms. And you really want to focus on where your potential clients are and where your peers are and your competitors. And they, for the most part, are on LinkedIn. They're not necessarily looking for, in this case, ADR services in on TikTok. It just doesn't
Right.
make sense. So you don't need to be on that. And like the reason you need to be on LinkedIn is so that you can build your network, build your brand, and build your business. And those three things are incredibly important and easy to do on LinkedIn. It's also the professional platform in terms of some of those other platforms that are also sort of like blurring the lines between professional and personal. So I would say for the purposes of this audience and for any lawyer, and really I would go even more broadly on business professionals, LinkedIn is the place where you're going to be doing business. So that's why you want to focus on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And it's, we should also mention that sure, there are like businesses and law firms and whatnot that have Facebook and Instagram pages, and some businesses are using X. Like I know, for example, the American Arbitration Association, we
Yeah,
have an official company LinkedIn page and we have an official company X page. But if you want to know the truth, the stuff that we post to the LinkedIn page is pretty much the same as the stuff that we post to the X page.
right.
And it's important for folks to know that it's fine if you have a personal Facebook or Instagram page as
Right.
well, but if that's for your family and for your friends and for personal stuff, you want to make sure you really keep that separate from your LinkedIn profile. And this isn't a lesson on privacy functions and who can view what on your other social media, but typically I advise people that if you're using a Facebook account or something like that for social reasons, to have the security settings turned on so people can't use just Google or just different ways to find you and kind of see your personal family stuff. It's not necessarily
Yeah,
professional.
and I would add to that. So I have a personal Instagram and I have a public Instagram that is
Yeah,
more professional, and I keep the two very separate. And so on Instagram, you can set privacy settings such that you either have a public or a private account, and that's very important. And I would also just say to everybody, recognize that while the lines are blurry in terms of social media and who is your friend on social media, be careful who you accept into certain networks. I
yeah,
don't necessarily accept all of the people in my professional world on my Facebook or my Instagram, my personal Instagram. I also do not post anything that I wouldn't want someone to screenshot and potentially share with other people who are outside of my world. So this is why I personally stay clear of certain topics on social media in general. And I would say just err on the side of caution with regard to all of these things and with your privacy. And there are lots of different ways to set privacy settings on all of these platforms, but you want to make sure that you do that. I would also encourage everybody listening to this to Google yourself regularly. So Google
yes,
yourself is super important because you get to see what people see when they search for you. And like we said, LinkedIn is an incredibly powerful part of this search functionality. But in addition to that, I'm also going to see other things about you when I Google you. So it's a form of reputation management to be looking at what your Google search results are, what people see when they look for your name, because guess what? They are looking you up
Yep.
every day. So you may not realize that a profile photo of yours was set to public on Instagram or Facebook, but it was, and that's why it's appearing in Google. So you just have to do a simple privacy check. But please do that, especially in this day and age. Also, another tip that's not related to LinkedIn, but I think is really important for personal branding is go look for your name on those sites that have home addresses.
Mm.
So True People Search, there's a bunch of them. They change all the time. They are pesky and annoying. And if you bought public property, oftentimes they will publish your home address. I
Yep.
do not want my home address online. So I go in and I tell them to remove my home address. So I just think it's, we want to be careful, right?
And I've said this before in other marketing presentations that I've done. When you Google yourself, only three things could possibly come up, and that's good stuff, bad stuff, or nothing at all.
Yeah.
And sometimes I tell neutrals when they're starting out in the field, Google might be the only Google in your resume, basically,
That
if you
might be
work
the
for
only
an
thing you
ADR
have.
provider or something like that, might be the only thing that they have.
Yeah.
And if nothing comes up about you, that could be actually as bad as bad things coming up, right? Because, and the types of things that are dragged into a Google search are, as you mentioned, stuff that's published on your LinkedIn page. And it's important to make sure you have that function turned on your LinkedIn page. There are LinkedIn privacy settings that actually prevent things you post on LinkedIn from being dragged into Google. You absolutely want that dragged into Google so there's something about you. And scholarly papers that you might have written at or conferences that you've spoken at in the past, things like that. That's all the good stuff that pops up in
There
Google.
are people also, Aaron, who set privacy settings on LinkedIn such that people can't see their last name or their photo
Mm.
or different aspects of their background. I want you to think about LinkedIn as being like basically a public website where
Yes.
your bio would appear. So why are you like, hiding some information? You want people to see everything they possibly can, not just your connections. So think of it in terms of like, I would say an abundance mindset. And just, I always like, I'm like, okay, like, yes, privacy, I get that. But like, this is, I want to assume good intent with this. And I want to make sure I'm the most visible. And so if I have a LinkedIn profile and a LinkedIn presence, I want everybody to see everything that I'm doing. There's no harm in doing that. In fact, you absolutely should.
That makes perfect sense. And I would say to somebody, you shouldn't probably have a LinkedIn profile at all
Yeah,
if you want to be private with it. What's the point of even having the profile if people
I
aren't going to find
agree.
you, right?
People
So, yeah.
say, sometimes people say, I don't want people to know who my clients are. I don't want them to see my connections. I'm like, okay, there's no way that somebody could actually tell who your exact clients or connections are at all. So you don't have to really worry about that. But I'm like, maybe LinkedIn isn't the right platform for you if you want to maintain that, element of privacy, to that degree. I think personally, Aaron, that LinkedIn is the safest social media platform because, again, like a lot of people are nervous about sharing things about their children and about their personal life, and so they're not necessarily on LinkedIn. I'm sorry,
Right.
on Facebook or Instagram, or they're like very careful about what they post. At least you know that the things you're posting on LinkedIn are to support your brand, support your business as professional. You're not really giving away a lot of anything that, you would be a little bit more careful about. So I think it's the safest platform. And if you don't believe in social media at all, and you're like, oh, I don't do that, you really do need to at least have a LinkedIn profile, and you need to know how LinkedIn works because other people are going to be searching for you. And just like you said, when I Google somebody and I don't see anything, I'm going to be like skeptical that like, like what's going on with that person. Same thing on LinkedIn. If I go on your profile and it's bare bones or it doesn't look like it's been filled out or updated recently, I'm going to be like, oh, that's like maybe a red flag in this day and age.
Yeah, and I just go on to say that it's not just individuals, obviously, with LinkedIn pages. I mentioned briefly like companies, like the American Arbitration Association, where I work, has one. Law firms have them. Other ADR providers, neutrals. Like there is usually a corporate page, an individual page, but LinkedIn is used across both spaces.
But it's a very different strategy for how to manage like a personal page versus your company page. And I
Correct.
tell you, one of the things, no matter how many followers your company page has, you will never go viral on a LinkedIn company page post, but you will, or you could as a person. And that is for many different reasons that we can get into. But I would tell you that you need to have both and you need to cultivate your own brand on
Right.
LinkedIn.
Right. So very basic here. How does one set up a LinkedIn profile and is it free? Now you mentioned it was free. We'll talk a little later in our conversation today about all the various paid options for folks that want to do that.
Yeah, so setting up a LinkedIn profile is completely free. It's totally easy. You need to do it on your desktop. It is something that takes, I don't know, I would say less than 10 minutes. If you're starting from scratch, you're going to want to make sure you have a few things at the outset, and that would be to be thinking about, you need a headshot. You need a recent headshot. It needs to be a headshot in which you are smiling, and it needs to be something that is from, I would say, the last 5 years or so. It's very easy to get new headshots. Invest in a headshot. It's going to be so important. Please make sure you're smiling in your headshot. So have that at your disposal so that you can easily upload that. You're also going to want to make sure that you have a copy of your CV nearby so that you can go back and look at the dates at which you worked at certain employers. You want to go back and fill out your entire professional history setting up a LinkedIn profile, because you don't want to sell yourself short or make it seem like you have less experience than you do. And there's a way to fill in defunct firms. You just want to go in and be robust. You want to put in your education in there. You want to make sure you also have something you're thinking about at the very top for a cover image, and that can be something as very simple as your logo, but I would really love for people to go the extra mile there and at least put their contact information up there. And there are very easy ways to do this online, even if you feel like you are not necessarily somebody who is a computer savvy or tech savvy. I also want you guys to be making sure you have a copy of your bio nearby, because you will need that to plug into the about section. And my advice to all of you is that your bio, as it stands on your website, or the one that you give to professional associations when you're speaking, is a little bit more formal than I would prefer for LinkedIn in this day and age. At the very least, one of the things you should do is put your bio in LinkedIn in the first person, so that you are talking about yourself. Like, I am a social media strategist. I am a mediator who specializes in blah, 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 versus Stephanie Marone is blah, blah, blah. It's just, the tone has changed, especially over the last 4 or 5 years since COVID. And I think we've gotten a little more informal in that way. But I want you to think about LinkedIn as the tone should be as if you're having coffee with someone versus being very formal. And I would cut the awards. Like, you don't want to talk about how many awards you've won and those sorts of things. Save that for your bio. But you will need to be able, when you're setting up the profile, and you'll need a few of those things, so that your headshot, your bio. I would also think about, you're going to want to make sure, so this happens a lot. People have multiple profiles. They don't realize that they set up a profile years ago, and then there's a profile in their name, and then you have two profiles, and you're like, well, how do I merge them? You can merge your LinkedIn profiles. It requires oftentimes showing LinkedIn proof of your identity, and that would mean uploading your driver's license. And if you
Yeah, I'm gonna actually cut you off there right there, because that's actually something extremely important to mention. So some of our folks, especially people that have been using LinkedIn for a while, might not actually realize that, was it last year or a couple of months ago, LinkedIn actually started doing the identity verification thing. I don't remember the exact moment, but in order to cut down on so-called fake LinkedIn profiles, and we can talk about that later, but such a thing does exist. LinkedIn started adding a check mark next to people's names that have gone through a verification process. It is very easy. You simply have to upload a copy of a driver's license or a passport or something to verify who you are. And I highly recommend doing this because, again, you don't want your LinkedIn profile to seem suspect. And folks that don't have that check mark or aren't willing to get the check mark, that's another thing to kind of worry about. Okay, so along those lines, you talked about what should be in your LinkedIn profile. And a couple of things that irk me, and maybe you might have some guidance on this, is it's really important. You get to choose your title, kind of under your name, what you do. So for most of our audience, it's going to be mediator or arbitrator or mediator and arbitrator or neutral or ombudsman, whatever it might be. But a lot of times I see connector of dreams.
Yeah.
Or something like random like that, where you have no idea what it is that they do based on that title, and it might even seem kind of strange. Do you recommend strange titles like that?
Okay, when it comes to your LinkedIn headline, I recommend the following. So, the default on LinkedIn is that it will pull in your current job title and your current company. And if you don't change it, it is going to be, in many cases, a little generic. And so, while I believe that anybody in this field and anybody who is a lawyer, anybody honestly who's a business professional should be using very professional language in there, I also think that you're doing yourself a disservice by not customizing your headline area. You get 220 characters to describe what you do, for whom you do it, and why you do it, and you should take advantage of that. Now, that does not mean that you should use superlatives and adjectives that are very overarching or very, a little too self-promotional. It should also be something that you're being careful about what you say, is particularly given what you do, that you're not overly promising things. You're not calling yourself an expert. You're not calling yourself the best, and you're also not using generic business speak words like, like I see that a lot, right? So you want to make sure that this is accurate. You want to make sure it's unique. And I like to use the pike symbol in between the phrases and words that I use. So this is just the up and down symbol. You can use a lot of different ones. I don't like emojis. I don't think that that's professional. I think you should do this. I think you should be succinct, but I think you should also be descriptive. And you also, for example, if you do something on the side, like let's say you are, the president of an association, or you have a podcast or something, you want to put those in there. You have a blog, I would put that in there. You could be like, podcast host or columnist or whatever it is. Like, so anything that can add to your professional background will help you a lot. But keep out the superlatives, keep out the overarching copy and text that really make you sound just a little full of yourself. Like, you don't want to do that. You want to be factual, but you want to stand out, and you should customize this 100%.
Right. And obviously, what you have in your LinkedIn profile should match what you'd have in any professional resume that you'd submit to an employer. I've seen situations where one's LinkedIn page differs from their resume significantly, and we don't want to, set off any alarms. Okay, so connection requests. LinkedIn is a social network. You do connect with other people on it. First of all, how do you send and receive connection requests?
So the process of sending connection requests and accepting them is very easy, very straightforward. You can do this from your phone or with using the LinkedIn app, which everybody should have. It's very easy to download the LinkedIn app. I should have said that earlier. You just go to the App Store, search for LinkedIn, and then you'll you'll just download the app to your phone. You will also have the opportunity so I would just say, like, there are certain things that you can do on the app that you and certain things that you can do on the desktop version, and not all of it is the same. So when in doubt, go to their desktop and do things there. So the process by which you would be adding connections and accepting connections is pretty straightforward. And I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is knowing who to accept and who to send connection requests to.
Yeah.
So a lot of people use LinkedIn in a very passive way, whereby they are accepting requests that come to them versus actively taking a role in adding connections to their profile and to their network. And you should 100% put yourself in that other category, which is that you are going to actively add people to your network. So it's a really important thing to be cultivating your connections on an ongoing basis. And so in terms of who to add, and if you're just starting out or you haven't really focused on this, I would say to do the following. I would think about people you work with. I would think about clients of yours. I would think about peers. I would think about people in the community. For example, maybe in this community that through your different committees on which you participate, and conferences you've attended. Those are always good places to think about people you used to work with. Another really important area of people to add to your network. And the more you add people, the more you connect with people, the smarter LinkedIn gets, because what it does is then give you suggestions in the people you may know tool. It will also give you suggestions for people you went to law school with, undergrad with, people in your geographic location. For somebody like you and me, that's a little more difficult because we live in big metropolitan areas, but for
Right.
some people who live in other areas in the US and abroad, it could be better for you. But the more information you give to LinkedIn, the smarter it will give you suggestions of people. And in terms of who to connect with, I always say use this rule of thumb. So my network on LinkedIn is 35,000 plus people. So obviously I don't know all 35,000 people, but what I do know is that if somebody sends me a connection request and they are in my area or somebody who I think is interesting, I will accept their request and I will also send them requests. The other thing to know is that if you went to a conference or if you listen, for example, to this podcast, and let's say or you saw me speak at a conference and you said, you know what, Stephanie's really interesting. I would love to see her updates and I would love to connect with her. Send me a note or that person saying that, I watched your podcast and I thought it was great. I recently read an article of yours, whatever it is, right? Or I know so and so, you and I have a connection in common. Reference something, go that extra mile and send them a very personalized request about why you're asking them to be in your network, and they 9 times out of 10 will accept. But the way you're going to build your network is to go a little bit broader than your immediate circle, and there are going to be people who know you, who you don't necessarily know. So it could be somebody you did a matter with, somebody who is at an organization that you work with. And I would say just look at the companies, look at how many connections in common you have. That's a really good litmus test. If I see that I have 10 or more connections with someone, I'm like, you know what? That's probably somebody in my universe who makes sense for me to connect with. But it's really a personal choice. I would just say when you're really trying to build your network, you've got to take an active role in doing this, or you're not going to go very far in building that network.
All right. And you mentioned something important about actually making the effort to send a personal message along with the connection requests. And let's make this an interactive podcast episode. Stephanie, I don't know if you'd be open to the same, but I certainly, if there's anybody listening to this podcast that wants to connect to Aaron Gotthelf, send me a connection request and send me a message. In the message, say you enjoyed listening to the podcast episode, and I will accept your connection request.
I think that's a great thing to try, and do it with me too.
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to accept. Also, I should mention there's a difference, Aaron, between connecting with someone and following someone.
Right.
So you can follow someone and that's a one-way street. That means you see their content, but they don't see yours and they don't see all of your posts. And it's a very, I think it's a better thing to go that extra mile and connect with someone, because it's a more two-way kind of thing. And you get the ability to message somebody depending on what level of LinkedIn you have, but it's easier when they're a first degree connection.
All right, and I'll say this too. Sometimes I'll get a notification that somebody is now following me. They didn't necessarily send me a connection request, but they wanted to follow me. And I'll look at their profile and see there's somebody really interesting that I might want to connect to, and I'll send them a connection request and then they'll accept it. So sometimes it's important to pay attention to LinkedIn sends you usually a notification if somebody wants to connect to you, has accepted your connection request, or is now following you. So you can kind of stay on top of that. And
that's a good point. That was a really, it's important to do that. I don't know that everybody goes through their LinkedIn profile and their connections often enough to see who's actually following you and who's on that list. And so you should do that. You should also feel free to edit your connections and audit your network.
Yeah.
Maybe there's someone to whom you don't want to be connected anymore. People, Aaron, ask me all the time, how do you know, this just happened to me before. How do you know so-and-so at such and such organization? And I was like, I didn't know that person. And I was like, I told them, and I'm like, you know what? And I looked the person up and I'm like, does that person really add anything to my network? It's very easy to, I would say don't disconnect with people for no reason, but you certainly could feel like you can prune your network from time to time.
Okay. Yeah, no, and just one thing to talk about. There's this term called a lion, Lion, an open networker. It's just basically somebody who's kind of agreed to accept any connection request. And
really, I never heard that before.
I would say that I'm not a lion because I don't accept every connection request that I get. The ones that I don't accept typically have something to do with it's somebody that I know is going to try to sell me a
Yeah,
product and
sell the hard
service.
sell. It's one of my it's immediate grounds for me to disconnect from you when you
Yeah,
do the hard sell. I
right.
hate
And it's not that I don't necessarily need products and services. It's just that in my current position, they haven't done any research into who I am. So there's a good chance they're selling me a product or a service I don't want or need.
Yeah,
Or
I've been
they,
asked to buy a donut franchise. I mean, I get the most ridiculous things all the time. A marriage proposal, it really runs the gamut, but I really do not like the hard sell. And if I accept your connection request and you do the hard sell immediately, I oftentimes will disconnect from you.
and we should also say that you just mentioned the marriage proposal request.
Yeah.
That's not what LinkedIn's for. LinkedIn's not a
No.
dating website. It's not to hit on people, harass people, that kind of stuff. You should keep that in mind. I'm going to spend a minute here really quick because we're going to have people that are, I said mediators and arbitrators listening to this. And this next segment is specifically for arbitrators. And I kind of wrote a note for myself here. It says, if I'm an arbitrator and I connect to an attorney that I have an active case with, could this be considered ex parte communication and does it need to be disclosed? And the answer is absolutely, it's ex parte communication. And I highly advise against that. I am not opposed to our arbitrators connecting with attorneys maybe in the past that they've had cases with, or maybe even an attorney they'd like to have a case with in the future. But if you meet somebody through doing an arbitration and you have an active case with them, absolutely do not connect with them on LinkedIn. That is ex parte communication, has to be disclosed, can get you into a lot of trouble. And then along those lines, at AAA, we recommend some form of social media disclosure during the appointment process when someone's being appointed to a case. It can just be something very simple saying like, listen, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X, I'm on whatever sites. I have such and such number of connections as of today's date. Some of these people I know really well. Some of these people I might not know at all. If you have any questions and would like me to further disclose anything, you're happy to reach out to me about any of the people that I'm connected with and ask me what my relationship is with those people. And it really can be as simple as that. There are some arbitrators that really go kind of the next level in their disclosures and they kind of cross-reference every person they're connected to a law firm or an attorney they might have on a case, and they simply disclose that individually. You can do that as well, but sometimes I think the blanket disclosure is good to use. So separate from email, LinkedIn has an in-mail function where you can send messages to other people on LinkedIn. Now, my understanding, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, is if I'm connected with somebody already, I can use the in-mail function to communicate with them. But if they are not one of my connections, and I'm using the free level, the free service that LinkedIn offers, I can't send them an email, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so along those lines, that's one of the things the paid version of LinkedIn allows you to do. And I think depending on your level, you get a certain number a month or a year of
Mhm.
in-mails you can send to people you're not connected to. Is there anything else that really stands out to you about the paid function and why somebody might want to use the paid function, other
Yeah,
features?
I get this question a lot. So, in terms of the paid function, so for this audience, it would be premium. There are other elements of LinkedIn, such as Sales Navigator. There's a recruiting function. You will not need all of those. There's a lot of other options. So, I've had LinkedIn Premium for as long as for as long as it's been offered, and the price has gone up a lot over the years. I do think that depending on how much you are going to be using LinkedIn, it does make sense to have it, or at least to try it for a few months. You can cancel it if you don't find that you're using the features. So, in addition to being able to message people to whom you're not connected as a first degree connection, you also get other tools such as the ability to see who's looking at your profile. There are some other analytic tools that you get. There is a whole list of things that I can give to you guys so you can look that up and see if it makes sense to you. I think that it does make sense for some people but not necessarily in the beginning. I think that if you are just getting started using LinkedIn, focus on your profile, focus on building your network. And then once you have those things, then maybe you want to delve into utilizing some of LinkedIn's more advanced features that are paid. There are a lot of things you can do with the free version of LinkedIn. But if you do believe that you are going to be doing a lot of networking and using LinkedIn for really to be a very big cornerstone of your marketing and business development strategy, then you may want to consider that. I do think at another point we could talk about Sales Navigator for some of the folks who are advanced in this area, and that could be a good tool. But again, before you do any of these things, you need to have a strong profile and you need to have a strong network, or none of these tools will even help you in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I used to work as a recruiter at an employment agency, and for somebody in that line of work, I
Yeah,
obviously needed something like LinkedIn
100%.
Premium because I was conducting, thousands of searches a month,
Right.
and on the free version, eventually LinkedIn starts to limit how many searches you can do in a month, and I needed the ability to connect with via InMail folks that I weren't connected to because I would, send them some information about a job I might be recruiting for or something like that. So in
Mhm.
that line of work that you mentioned, being a recruiter or a salesperson, the premium makes a lot more sense. Now, when it comes to posting things, um, should mediators and arbitrators, neutrals be posting things on LinkedIn, and what do you think they should post?
So when it comes to what to post and if you should post, number one, yes, you should post. I would also give you the advice that if LinkedIn isn't necessarily part of I guess let me say this a different way. So if you aren't someone who likes social media or feels that social media is easy to use, if you're not someone who necessarily doesn't want to be like in the public eye like that, LinkedIn in terms of posting may not be for you, but there are going to be some things that will make sense to post, such as you spoke at a conference, you were a guest on a podcast, you wrote an article, even attended a conference. It doesn't have to be just speaking. Attending a conference is
Yep.
also important. You attended a program and you thought the speakers were really interesting. You wanted to write a recap post. Great. You go to a reunion of your law school. You go to a reunion of your past employer, whatever it is. There are so many things that are appropriate to post. You win an award. There are a lot of ways that you can publicize that news. I would just err on the side of not, again, patting yourself too hard on the back, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things. You get a new job, you start a new business, you're going to want to share that with your network. Your company, your practice is expanding. Okay. So all of these things are appropriate to share. You may not find yourself in a position or where you feel comfortable being a thought leader on LinkedIn where you want to have that voice. And that's okay. What I want you to do is to at least understand how it works. The other thing you can do is share other people's posts. So, for example, you could go on your company page and share things from trade associations. Like, that's a great thing to do. You can share an article that somebody else wrote. You can share an article that a colleague of yours published that you found really interesting. You can shout out a client, although I know you're going to say something about that and the rules
Yeah.
about that.
Sure.
So why
Right.
don't you just say it because you know you want to?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I advise our neutrals against posting when it comes to clients in law firms and attorneys at law
Mhm.
firms is one thing that a lot of attorneys like to post on LinkedIn is celebrating a big jury verdict, for example. Let's say you're a personal injury attorney, right? And you just got a $50 million jury verdict for some auto accident case. I would be a
Mazel tov. Also, I would like to say
congratulations, right?
congratulations.
A, it would be very inappropriate to reshare that to your page, congratulating your friend.
Oh
You
yeah.
probably shouldn't comment on it, congratulating your friend. You probably shouldn't even like it. Now, why? Well, here's what happens. When you share things, when you like things, when you comment on things, and this is something that's important to mention. When you comment and when you like things on LinkedIn, people outside your network can sometimes see those,
Oh,
right?
and there's a record of it. If they go to your profile, Aaron, they can see all the things that you've
Right.
liked and posted and shared and commented on.
All right, so let's say I'm a consumer attorney. I've been a personal injury attorney my entire life. Now I'm mediating personal injury cases or arbitrating UIM or UM cases. And my friend just got a $50 million jury verdict for an auto accident case, and I celebrate it and I like it and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess who's also going to see my enthusiasm? The defense bar. And
Yes.
what's going to happen the next time I'm on a rank and strike list for any type of case involving personal injury or consumer law? Well, the defense bar is probably going to remember that you're a big fan of when the plaintiff side wins these things, and they're going to strike you. Even if you're just a mediator doing mediation only, and you don't have to go through the level of disclosure that an arbitrator might go through, you have
Right.
to be really careful what you celebrate. Now, I wanted to add another thing when we're talking about posting things about yourself or that other people post. So we've kind of like I've talked amongst my colleagues at AAA, and we're kind of trying to see what trends, and we're going to talk about what trending is in a second.
Mhm.
But you can go to your LinkedIn page when you do a post, and you can see how many views it got. And I can tell you the ones that get the most views typically have something organic about them, and usually it's a photo. So if I go to an event and I just say I had a really great time at such and such conference, I can type in that text and post it. But if I actually have a picture of myself at the event, or even better, a picture with some of my colleagues, that's going to get a lot more views and attract a lot more attention. So, I'll just that'll lead into our next part of our conversation here.
Mhm.
Tagging, what is tagging? How do you do it? Who should you tag? Who should you not tag? That kind of stuff.
Okay. Tagging. This is a good topic. So, tagging is when you mention someone on LinkedIn, but not just type in their name. You actually press a button. So, you're going to use the @ sign and then you're going to type in their name. And then you're going to see that their LinkedIn profile shows up and it's going to be highlighted. And then what happens is there'll be a hyperlink. You hover on that person's name and you'll get taken to their LinkedIn profile if you wanted, and the person will get a notification that you tag them in the post. You should only tag people in a post that are directly related to the post. So, for example, if you listened to this podcast and you thought it was great, you could tag me as the guest. You could tag Aaron as the host. Okay. You could tag AAA as the entity having the post, and that will also then link it to the AAA company page and they'll see it and get a notification. Now, this helps because you could potentially then get a bunch of likes on your post when other people see that. And it can help build relationships. For example, if you went to a conference and you liked what somebody said, or you saw me on the podcast and you were like, oh, she had some really good things to say, and then you gave that person a compliment, that's only going to build relationships. But you should very much err on the side of using these sparingly because they can also be considered spam. So there's a couple things I consider spam
Yeah.
hashtags to an extent, but when somebody tags me in a post that has nothing to do with me, so they do this for a couple reasons. They want me to see it so that I then comment on it, or they'll ask me for like my opinion on something. And they're also trying to engage with my network through their posts. So you really don't want to do that. You don't want to put people's names that don't have anything to do with the post. And you don't want to do that either in the comments. I do see people do that. Like, well, they'll say, what do you think of this? And then they'll put like 6 or 7 people in there. That's really not a LinkedIn best practice. So my advice to using tags is to use them sparingly and use them only when the name of the person or the entity is directly related to your post. And it is very easy. You just, again, hit that @ sign. If, for example, like for some reason somebody's name is not coming up, I would just open up another browser and type in their name, their company. You may have their name misspelled, or maybe they go by Michael and you have them as Mike. And so, or there's a lot of the same people with the same name. If your name is like Mike Smith, sorry, that sucks for Mike Smith, but
Right.
you're going to want to go through and make sure you tag the right person and the right entity. You'll see some organizations have multiple pages. Go and make sure you're tagging the right one. And we talked about how people have multiple LinkedIn profiles. Make sure you're tagging the right LinkedIn profile as well.
All right. One thing that I've struggled with, and maybe you could offer me some guidance on, is what is the best time to post? So, what is the best day of the week to post and the best time of day to post?
Okay, so what is the best day and what is the best time to post? This is very subjective. It's going to depend on lots of different things. I would say for the most part, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are the best days to post. And I'll tell you why. And they should be in the morning. It should be during normal commuting hours or when people wake up and they look at LinkedIn. That's what they do. People then tend to get busy and they tend to be unfocused on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I will also say that the later in the day you post, the worse the post will do, because people get busy at the end of the day. They're not necessarily looking at LinkedIn, and you want to give your LinkedIn post at least 24-hour cycle to do well. Sometimes it takes even longer. But if you post in the morning, you're going to get more eyes on the post, and then it will build sort of a velocity in terms of the visibility of the post. So you want to post when the most people are on LinkedIn, and that's going to be in the morning. If for what, so it's a little tricky when it comes to time zones. So let's say you live in the West Coast and you want to reach people on the West Coast and the East Coast, and then also in London. Okay, you got to make a decision about like the best time to post. You can also pre-schedule your posts directly on LinkedIn so that it will post at a certain time. I would say like if you are an East Coast person, posting around 8 o'clock in the morning at 8:30 is good. I would say if you're a West Coast person, you might want to post at 6:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning, whatever it is, or pre-schedule those posts. I will say that Monday morning and Friday afternoon are probably the worst times to post, particularly in the summer. Fridays really are not a day that I post at all because people are just trying to wrap it up and get out of the office. And Monday morning is really tricky because people are coming back to their inboxes and they're like, okay, like the last thing in the world they want to do is focus on your LinkedIn post. Although this may be different for everybody. I also think you should try out posting on the weekend, because I have found that sometimes I get really good engagement because people are less busy on the weekend and have more time to catch up on content, and there's less competition to do that. So as a general rule of thumb, I would say Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the morning would be my preference for when you post. Please do not post more than once a day. You hurt both posts, because what you're doing is sort of telling LinkedIn, I'm not sure if this is, why is this person posting so much, like is a spam or not? And the first post is doing well, and then you post it again and you post something else, and it's just, and I would tell you also, when you post, please do not edit your post for 1 hour. And that is because basically what you're doing is hurting the post. It's going to, and this does not count for company page posts, but it could hurt the visibility of your post when you go and touch it. If you see something that's wrong with the post, delete it and then repost it. It's better than editing the post in that first hour.
I've definitely made that mistake, and everything you're saying about the timing is correct. I'm a bit of a night owl, and I live in the Pacific time zone.
Right.
So sometimes early in the morning, I'll post something, let's say on a Tuesday or a Wednesday morning early, so it gets, 6:37, 8 o'clock East Coast time gets seen, and then it can like expand throughout the day. I have the most success with that. I can say honestly, I haven't had really any success with weekend posting or holiday posting. We should mention that we're going into the holiday period right now. If you're posting anything other than, some people, their law firms might do a happy holidays post or something like that, just so people think about them over the holidays.
Yeah.
I've seen that, but like Christmas Day wouldn't be the best day to mention that you won the local bar association attorney of the year or something like that.
I would save your best content for the most important times. And also, like, you can recycle your greatest hits at the end of the year too. Like, you might want to do, these are some of the blog posts that I have posted this year, and do a recap, or like do a look at some of the podcasts you've spoken at. You can do a lot of different things. One thing to say, it's please make sure that, like, so for example, like okay, so you've turned on the oven, you would never like turn on the oven, put something in the oven and leave your house, right, Aaron? Like that would be reckless.
Right.
So by the same token, you would not post something on LinkedIn at 8 in the morning and then shut LinkedIn down and go about your business all day. And the reason is that it's very important to be nurturing the comments on your post. So the more you comment, so if somebody leaves a comment on your post, You want to go and respond to each comment. And you want to respond to the comment with something more than just thanks. Thanks for your comment. Great point. This helps to build your network, but also it tells LinkedIn, oh, this post is actually doing well and there's engagement and we should move it up in the visibility. I think this is important to mention to the folks listening is that just because you post something doesn't mean everybody in your universe will see it to whom you're connected. And in fact, they won't. And so what does that mean? So let's say you have 1,000 connections. You post something. You think that all 1,000 connections are going to see it, and they're not because they're not on LinkedIn. The algorithm is really tricky, and it's not necessarily going to blast out. It's not like sending an email and it blasts out your post to everybody. It shows your post to people with whom you've interacted the most recently, and it also shows it to people with whom you've messaged recently and people who have elected to follow you. So I don't know if folks realize this, but if you click the bell, which everybody has on their profile, it's on the right-hand side at the top of your profile. If somebody clicks on that, they're going to get a notification when you post, and they will then see your post. But there's a lot that goes against us when we're trying to stand out from the sea of all the things in people's news feeds. And so don't assume that most of your connections will see your post, because they won't. That's why you want to post when it makes the most sense. And that's why you want to respond to the comments, because all of these things help the visibility and the velocity of your LinkedIn posts.
Which feeds nicely into my next question. What is trending and how do we get something to trend?
Okay, so when you talk about trending, it's like kind of like it's like, okay, it's LinkedIn, like what's really trending? I'll tell you what's trending on LinkedIn is video. So short form video, less than 2 minutes, does really well. It is not easy to be on video. Trust me, I do a lot of videos, and it takes a while to get comfortable doing them, but LinkedIn has made the decision that they're giving some preferential treatment to videos and pushing them. You'll see many more videos showing up in your feed, suggested videos. So I would say if video is something that you are thinking about, you may want to try it out. You don't need any fancy equipment to do that. What do you talk about in a video? Just like try to break down a topic. Maybe you spoke at a conference. Again, I'm going to tell you, repurpose. You spoke at a conference, you had slides, you wrote an article, you have notes, turn that into like a 30-second or a 1 minute kind of, pull out the key points and make it a key takeaways piece. Another thing, you mentioned this before, posting without images, your posts aren't going to do well.
Right.
And posting generic images, no, you're not going to do well at all. Any image you have where you're in the image and there's people in the image, those do really well. And I would encourage you to do that. Another trend is moving away from hashtags. So I'm not sure that hashtags even work anymore on LinkedIn. If you're going to use if you're like, okay, some people are listening and they're like, what is a hashtag? It's basically a way to categorize things by using the pound sign and then a term. A lot of people misuse hashtags. They don't know that, something like law would not be a good one. Something like mediation wouldn't be a good one because it's too broad.
Right.
And there are some hashtags that are way too narrow. If you're going to use hashtags, you want to use less than 5 and you want to put them at the end of the post, but I don't really think it helps that much anymore. So I would tell you video would be something to consider. Another thing, LinkedIn newsletters. This may be a little bit more advanced for this audience at this point, but everybody, remember I said that your posts don't go to everybody.
Yep.
But if you send a LinkedIn newsletter out, which company pages can do and individuals, they do go to everybody at least the first time. So it can be a very effective way, especially if you want to build like an email list and you want to have a newsletter. Sending out a LinkedIn newsletter is something I think a lot of people don't do. And there's a huge audience out there for content like that.
Well, one thing then this kind of ties into the whole discussion here about using LinkedIn and how active you should be and LinkedIn etiquette and all that is, if you're going to have a LinkedIn page, you really should use it. One thing that frustrates me is, so for example, with connection requests, right? There are people out there that probably are sitting on 300, 400, 500 connection requests, and they only log into their LinkedIn page once every 6 months and then connect them all, accept them all once every 6 months. Like that kind of stuff, it just shows that, like, why even have a LinkedIn page, right? You're not an engaged user. The people that post things I think for some of our folks just starting out, maybe once a day is a little aggressive.
Absolutely. And err on the side of posting less if it's also about quality versus quantity. Once a week, twice a week. Share something of somebody else's. Get comfortable liking other people's posts and commenting. That's how I built my brand in the
Correct.
early days where I didn't feel comfortable yet sharing my own opinions. I did post about when I went to an event or a recap of the event and those sorts of things, but I didn't feel comfortable yet. So I would leave a comment on people's posts, and that helped me build my network. So you can just dip your toes into this, but you don't have to be, like I said, most of you are not going to use LinkedIn like I, for example, use LinkedIn, and that's okay. We just want you to know how to use it and really use it as a networking tool, if nothing else, that it's working for you also in the background, building your brand by having a strong profile, and that you're connecting with people that it makes sense to, and it's opening doors for you, opportunities, and that you again understand how it works.
And there's such a thing as a LinkedIn super connector. I don't know if I'm officially a super connector or if I have enough connections for that. You probably do. And that simply means, unless you have a better definition than I do, that there are certain people that have so many thousands of connections within a particular industry that they're considered a super connector with that industry. And if you connect to them, it's going to change the type of content you get in your feed. You'll have more second degree connection requests that might be a little easier to connect to. And in the ADR industry, I certainly welcome any other ADR professionals that want to connect with me. I accept those requests. In the marketing industry, like such somebody such as yourself, probably is happy to accept those connection requests. But along those lines about, sending connection requests, accepting connection requests, who you should be connected to, what you should post and all that, I think we should kind of close today with just what to kind of be careful with on LinkedIn as far as scams go and mischievous folks that might use LinkedIn. I just, want to mention it's kind of the general same rules of cybersecurity that you might use with your email or anything else you do on the internet. Unfortunately, there are some bad people out there that use LinkedIn for nefarious reasons, run various scams, that kind of stuff. Sometimes I get like a LinkedIn message from somebody in a foreign country that is asking for money or wants to do
Right.
business with me or sends me a link to click on. So just use your common sense if you have anything to add.
Yeah, and if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. There are a lot of people who will sell you things describe different kinds of services that they could provide to you. And I would just say, make sure you run those by other people and vet it before you consider that. There's no way to buy followers or buy visibility on LinkedIn either. You really have to build things the old-fashioned way, but just be and report different people and accounts that seem nefarious and that are very sort of like pushing to do different things, like that sort of thing. But listen, I want to assume good intent with everything on LinkedIn. I do think the verification thing that you brought up has cracked down on a lot of these fake profiles, and that is very helpful.
Yeah. All right, Stephanie, if folks would like to get in contact with you regarding LinkedIn or anything else marketing wise, how can they reach you?
So of course, Aaron, they can reach me on LinkedIn. And
Of
so please
course.
just search for me, connect with me, follow me, all of those things. And I mentioned I have a blog, the socialmediabutterflyblog.com, where there are lots of tips like this for LinkedIn, but also about personal branding and marketing and business development and networking, all of these things. And so you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me also, of course, on other social platforms. But I think for this audience, the value that you'll get from connecting with me will probably be mostly on LinkedIn. And then I also have a newsletter. You can sign up for that on my blog.
Okay, fantastic, Stephanie. This has been a fascinating discussion. Thanks for spending some time with me this
Thank
afternoon
you.
and connect to us both on LinkedIn. All
That's
right.
great. Thanks so
Bye.
much for having me. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on Resolutions. Today's episode has illuminated the powerful impact of effective dispute resolution and showcased the incredible individuals who dedicate themselves to this important work. Our mission is to explore the diverse world of dispute resolution, and we hope we've inspired you to engage with conflict and collaboration in new ways. If you're not yet a member of the ABA section of dispute resolution, we invite you to join our community of professionals making a difference. Your involvement can help us build a more harmonious society together. And if you found value in our conversations, please consider leaving us a review and a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more people and continue our journey towards excellence in dispute resolution. Until next time, keep solving problems, building bridges, and creating positive changes in your communities.